first of all, why don't we start with Professor Stolten. If you can start with, first say a little bit about your organization, maybe about a minute or so of ULIC. And the session was really going to talk about the fuel cell technology roadmaps from a government perspective, but obviously in terms of your organizations, if you can say a little bit about the roadmap, so to speak, and what your perspectives are from your organization in terms of the targets, how you're addressing the remaining challenges for hydrogen and fuel cells. So we'll start with you.
Yeah. I'm Detlef Stolten. I have been working with the ULIC Research Center since 1998 on fuel cells and hydrogen. The ULIC Research Center is the biggest research center in Germany at one site, I have to say. And we employ about 6,000 people now. And we have a major activity on energy, which still includes some nuclear, which we are reducing, phasing out, and otherwise we are concentrating on renewable energy and the supporting technologies like hydrogen fuel cells, etc.
And so we'll go around first then. So Piotr, maybe you can say a little bit about your background as well, and Los Alamos and your role there.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here. As we mentioned before, it's actually for some of us here, it's the first time in Israel, and we are very impressed with what we've seen so far. Now, as far as my history is concerned, I joined Los Alamos in 1997 for a short visit, sabbatical leave from the University of Warsaw in Warsaw, Poland, when I worked before, and I've stayed there at Los Alamos for the past 19 years. Associated with the Los Alamos Fuel Cell Program, which actually happens to be the oldest, we believe, continuously surviving fuel cell program in the world. So, and it's focusing predominantly on polymer electrolyte fuel cells. The program has been focusing on quite a few different areas of research and development. My interests have continuously been in the electrocatalysis area, fuel cell electrocatalysis, with known challenging being the cathode of polymer electrolyte fuel cells. The way we've been pursuing our research has changed over recently. We've created, DOE has created two research consortia which are very relevant to us as a Los Alamos Fuel Cell Program. The first one is Fuel Cells for Performance and Durability, and the recently formed, that Sunita mentioned in her opening remarks, is called Electrocatalysis Consortium, ElectroCat for short. And the primary focus of that consortium is to develop a non-precious metal catalyst or platinum group free catalyst for oxygen reduction reaction to reduce cost of fuel cells. So this is what my role has been as a co-chair of Electrocatalysis Consortium, together with the other co-lead, Debbie Myers from Argonne National Laboratory.
Thank you, Piotr. I'm Leora Elbaz. I'm a faculty member at the chemistry department at Bar-Ilan University in Israel. I think, so I've been working on fuel cells for, I guess, since my master's degree, since 2003. And I think the biggest addition to my knowledge in the field was when I was actually with Piotr and his co-workers in Los Alamos. I spent about 4 years over there, and then came back to Israel about 3 years ago and established the Israeli Fuel Cells Consortium, which is very generously funded by the Fuel Choices Initiative, who is also responsible for this event. We gathered together about 12 top researchers from all over Israel with different expertise in order to put Israel on the map when it comes to fuel cells research. and I think we have already done a good job, but now we're even more focused. We had a long day yesterday showing our work to our peers from mainly from the US, and I hope we managed to give the right impression. So there is a long, thank you. So there is still a long way ahead of us, but as I said yesterday, for me, fuel cells are no longer a dream. This is a reality. It happened this year that I realized that it's a reality when I drove for the first time a fuel cell operated car in Japan, and I saw fuel cell, hydrogen gas stations. So the joke that has always been in the field that fuel cells are only 5 years away is no longer a joke for me. It's a reality, it's happening, and it will happen here also.
Great, thank you. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to end just to give you a preview with the question of what are opportunities for collaborating and leveraging efforts so we can all make progress. So I think, you know, the international community, for those that are not aware, there are a lot of international efforts. We have the IEA, longstanding R&D collaboration, and then we have on the policy side IPHE, the International Partnership for Hydrogen and Fuel Cells in the Economy, which is 18 countries, originally co-launched by the United States State Department of Energy in 2003, 18 countries in the European Commission that coordinate and share information, policies, R&D programs, plans, strategies related to hydrogen and fuel cells. And so there's been quite a bit, especially now since COP21, we're seeing an increased emphasis. I don't know if all of you have seen the list of different technologies that the countries, and this is pretty historic, you think about almost 200 countries have agreed. And now, of course, the preparations for COP22, specifically in reducing the carbon emissions, meeting our collective goals. And hydrogen and fuel cells is specifically identified as one of the topic areas of collaboration. And then from the government side, you know, we're all looking at mission innovation. There's been a lot of discussion on doubling R&D budgets in the next 5 years. Countries have committed to that. And so again, when we talk about the R&D, so this morning we talked a little bit high level on policy and infrastructure. Now we're going to go a little bit deeper on the R&D side. And I always give the example in the United States with Henry Ford. I think most people know that he did not invent the automobile, but he developed the manufacturing method and the assembly line that made the automobile affordable. So in 1908, the Model T was introduced, and some may not know, but the initial price was $850, basically. And world record sales, 10,000 were sold right away. And then instead of keeping the price high, which he could have done and kept profits high, they reduced the price. He reduced the price to $575, and then in just a few years had, you know, huge market share. Basically, the automobile took off. And so, you know, in terms of cost, I think we all know that when the initial vehicles are sold, I think most people know the Toyota selling price, at least in the United States, is roughly $57,000 before any tax credits. And even with the strategy for the Prius, which was the first, you know, hybrid technology, the selling price does not reflect the true production cost. And so I think it's well recognized for new technology, the production cost is really going to be high. So we have to reduce the cost, and we have to improve performance and durability. We have hydrogen storage, and, you know, we have lots of areas where industry needs to reduce cost. And from the R&D perspective, I'd like to ask the panelists, you know, you are experts in the field, and you've been, you know, running major programs, have an idea of what's happening globally, for example, through the IEA. You know, obviously, Los Alamos, world class. I mean, the U.S. fuel cell program actually started in Los Alamos in the 1970s after the first oil embargo. So again, a fellow at Los Alamos, very, very prestigious here. And then obviously representing the new Israeli Consortium and all the efforts in Israel. Based on all of your, you know, world-class expertise, I'd like to ask if you can say a little bit more about what do you see as the biggest technical challenges, the R&D challenges, and we can start with Detlef again.
Well, it was already mentioned before that catalysts are very important. Platinum is a precious metal. If we can substitute it, it would be great. On the other hand, we can calculate today with the low amounts of platinum we use in advanced catalyst that we can roll out the fuel cell car without depleting the platinum resources. A very important point for fuel cell, which was not yet mentioned, is also electrolysis, because somewhere we need to get the hydrogen from. And generally it is power. Gas reforming is very prominent now, but that will be too CO2 loaded in order so that it won't comply with the COP21 requirements, which means 80% of CO2 reduction, etc. You know all of that. And longevity of electrolysis with low degradation is something which is not that well covered, like the same issues in fuel cells, because with fuel cells, big OEMs are taking care of that, whereas everything in the infrastructure is more or less taken care of by smaller companies. And even these companies who are big, I'd like to mention the German company Siemens, they break down into a lot of branches, and then the branch which is really taking care of that acts more or less, and that's true worldwide, like a mid-sized company again. So they are not the big OEMs behind it. And that needs more research backup than that what the OEMs need, who have a lot of research on their own. So I think a lot lies in the electrolysis sector, where we need much longer lifetimes. So lifetime of an electrolysis should be close to 100,000 hours. We are talking of a fuel cell in very dynamic operation, I admit, of about 5,000 hours, or maybe at most 10,000 hours right now. And also cost reduction of electrolysis is very important, which has not been done yet. And there are good opportunities, but the separator plates are important, the coatings are important, corrosion is important in this technology. So I think we need to discuss fuel cells and the hydrogen production together. The power source for the hydrogen is generally wind, it's PV, or it might be nuclear. And insofar that is more or less settled. As long as we talk about a coupling of electrolysis plus nuclear, it might be very stationary operation, which is easy. So a lot of the electrolyzer problems are already solved right now, because one can operate, for instance, alkaline electrolysis for a very long time. And if you go over to coupling it to windmills, it's already getting more critical. With the PV, it's even more critical because they're very high transients. And in the fuel cell sector, well, a lot has been covered already. It's catalysts, it's manufacturing technology, and which is also to a very high degree part of the OEM job. So that's why I'm not going into it that much.
Great, and then I should mention, I think we'll cover the hydrogen production a little bit later on as well, but obviously the hydrogen piece is really critical. But let's hear from Piotr.
Well, I think that the way I see it, maybe two major challenges for fuel cell and hydrogen technology. The first one is obvious, especially for bigger countries, such as the United States, that's the hydrogen infrastructure. I think in smaller countries, putting in place hydrogen infrastructure is much easier than in the country of the US size, or China size, or Russia size. As far as fuel cell technology is concerned, I think that the primary challenge right now lies with the two obviously conflicting requirements. The first, and the requirements in the areas which we could see from the spider chart, that on one hand we still have some distance to cover when it comes to durability, and also lowering the cost, which means very often the lowering of the catalyst cost. So once we start lowering the precious metal loading, we tend to run into durability issues, and some of them are difficult to explain, and that's where some significant fraction of electrocatalysis research in particular is being done. So compromising, reaching the compromise between the durability and cost requirements is probably the primary challenge for polymer electrolyte fuel cell technology, in my opinion.
Thank you. So, well, I'm last, and they took all the good ones. But so I'll just have to repeat some of the things, or maybe focus on what the Fuel Cells Consortium is interested in. And this is the first goal is to try to tackle the durability issue, which we, as we see it, and also the DOE sees it as the most significant issue when it comes to R&D. Implementation and infrastructure is very important, but this is not something that we deal with when we're doing R&D. Then, of course, cost, and if we can increase the overall activity, that would be also nice. Hence, we could compensate on others, and then that will be reflected on cost. But this is the top three for at least for me, and I think for the Israeli consortium as well.
And actually, maybe I can ask, how many of you are familiar with the new Israeli consortium? You can raise your hands. Okay, not too many. So maybe it might be good to give a little overview, since this is a new fuel cell consortium just launched. If you'd like to say a little bit more about the goals, the whole plan with the consortium.
Okay. So as I mentioned, we were trying to build a consortium that would put Israel on as not as a competitor, but also as a contributor to the worldwide community in fuel cells. And the way I saw it is that we have great researchers, some of which have lots of experience in the field. Some have made fuel cells before I was born even, I think. And putting them together, focusing them on certain objectives seemed to be very logical to me. So we brought in experienced people and unexperienced people. So we brought in also people that could contribute to this consortium through expertises that we, the people mainly doing fuel cells, do not have, like inorganic chemists, people that could synthesize molecules that most fuel cell researchers don't usually do on their daily lives, more complex structures and such. So we are trying to tackle basically all of the three objectives that I mentioned before, in an approach that goes from basic R&D, so from drawing stuff on the whiteboard up to implementing or showing a proof of concept in a real working fuel cell. The consortium is divided into three groups. We have the electrochemistry group, which is in charge of the electrochemical methods and characterization. Then we have the materials group, which is in charge of synthesizing materials and characterizing them. And then in the Technion, there's been a great investment in the Grand Technion Challenge. They're building a new building just dedicated for fuel cells research. And there will be the testing and durability team, which will basically work together with the other teams in order to implement and tell us, basically serve also as a feedback loop to the design and tell us how well we were doing and what is, where if we need to correct the initial guesses or not.
And maybe you can say again which universities are involved in the consortium.
Oh, sorry. So I also skipped mine. So it's basically 4 universities. We have Bar Ilan University, Tel Aviv University, Ariel University, and the Technion.
Great. And so what we'll do, since we actually have a little time, we still have another 20 minutes, is are there any questions from the audience? Any interest? No? Sorry, okay, I can't really see, but yes.
I'd like to ask, you said about the implementation of the forklift.
Mhm.
Are they going to supply for the general public also the hydrogen? Because they probably have a station for refueling the
For the forklifts?
will it be available for general customers to use?
Well, since I think the general public usually doesn't drive forklifts, yeah. Vehicles, yeah. So I think, to repeat the question, yeah. So to repeat the... Yeah, that's a good point. So for those who didn't hear the question, it was, is there an opportunity to use the hydrogen infrastructure for forklifts for regular customers for vehicles? And that's a good question. I think right now the forklifts are using 350 bar, and so they're lower pressure, they're much simpler, streamlined, not really stations, they're just refueling sites that are at the warehouse facilities, distribution centers. So they're really not meant to be the retail station approach, but we have talked with the large stores like the Walmarts and so forth, if they would also be interested in putting in 700 bar actual retail station infrastructure. So right now, I think there isn't really too many plans, or it doesn't seem feasible to build the forklift infrastructure into a retail station infrastructure. But I would say that we do have, in fact, in the US, we had legislation called the H prize. So it was basically a prize where we could incentivize industry to build, anything. There are different categories: 1 million, 4 million, 10 million, and we have an open prize. We have a finalist now that's in the testing phase, and the goal is to build a small-scale refueler, either home refueler or small community fueler for forklifts or vehicles. And it would have capability for 350 bar or 700 bar. And this is actually a small electrolysis system. So the finalist is undergoing testing right now. It's called Simple Fuel, in case you want to look that up. And that would be potentially an approach that would be applicable for both applications. But I think in general, there's recognition that you need to have different options for fueling. But from the car companies, there's really strong interest in having the retail station experience with fueling. So as opposed to going, somewhere having a more demonstration type fueler is not so much of interest. And so that's been the main focus, just building out the retail stations, at least a dispenser that people, so the idea is that it would be completely seamless. So they would go fuel up just like today's gasoline vehicles. In fact, in Washington, D.C., there used to be a station, a Shell station, many years ago, and I still remember people would go there with their gasoline vehicles and just go to the hydrogen pump and try to refuel their gasoline vehicles, not knowing that it was hydrogen. So that station actually, because there were no vehicles, that was really early on, that station ended up being shut down. So I think timing, having the right type of technology and experience for the regular consumer has been the main focus, but that is a good question. So we'll have to see what happens with the H prize and Simple Fuel if that pans out. One more question here from the audience? Yeah, in terms of 700 bar, you mean? So the question was, are there other options for supplying the hydrogen?
Unpressured
Unpressured hydrogen. Yes. You want to add something to the question? Yes, sure, sure.
Talking about storage, one of the problems is the high cost of the compressed hydrogen and the station.
Mhm.
So, would the DOE be ready to consider other kinds of storage technologies that promise, on one hand, safety, better price,
Mhm.
but slightly lower percentage per weight of volume?
Mhm. Yeah, so actually we do have a separate consortium called HIMARC, Hydrogen Materials Advanced Research Consortium, and that's focused completely on hydrogen storage, which is not 700 bar hydrogen storage. So we're looking at advanced materials. We have lots of work over the years on metal hydrides, carbon sorbents, even chemical hydrides. There's a relatively new company, some of you may have heard of, Hydrogenius, that's looking at liquid carriers. We funded liquid carriers as well. So we are definitely looking at those options. Low pressure, of course, has many advantages. But I think in the near term, again, the car companies have agreed on 700 bar. There have been rigorous testing, drop testing, bonfire, even gunfire testing. The tanks are safe, crash testing. And the vehicles, they can refuel, they can get you over 300 miles. They're available now commercially. So we really have a two-pronged strategy. One is, how do we get the vehicles out? Again, remember, in terms of our overall goals, both in terms of petroleum reduction, but also climate, greenhouse gas reductions, 2030 is just right around the corner. As I was saying yesterday, 2003, now it's almost 2017. 2003 doesn't seem that long ago. But we, as human beings, I think we always think the future seems a lot further away than the past. But 2003 was really recent. In that same amount of time, it's going to be 2030 already. So we have to start getting technology out there. And I think we all know that technology is going to change. And so that's why we have this two-pronged approach. We're looking at innovations, other approaches, but at the same time, trying to get the technology out and start to make an impact. So in terms of hydrogen storage, I think that's a good example. So now I'd like to move to, in the last part, really talking about where are there potential opportunities for collaboration. Or did you have one question?
I just wanted to add just one sentence.
Sure.
So I think hydrogen storage has and will be a significant, will take a significant role in this technology. I think one of the quiet revolutions in the field was actually when car makers agreed to put 700 bar cylinders underneath the cars, which are very relatively expensive. It's hard to control them. You need to contain hydrogen, which is not a gas that is easily contained. I'll not go into that, but you need certain materials. Other materials will be embrittled. So it is a quiet revolution, but it has happened, which afforded us to see car makers actually making commercial cars now. But it is still an important question, and it's I'm happy that you asked it, because this is something that needs to still be worked on.
Mm-hmm.
Would you accept take a company that is working on storage with a consultant? Or I think
Well, we need to talk about it later.
Yeah. So maybe we need not to have an additional consortium. Like we have 3 consortia on hydrogen production, fuel cells, and hydrogen storage, which you'll hear more about. So I think to wrap up, what we can do is talk about specific areas of potential collaboration. So why don't we start with Detlef? Again, if you look at the quote here, what are potential opportunities for collaboration? And I'd like to encourage those to maybe talk with the panel, talk with all of us afterwards during the break as well. So why don't we start with Detlef?
Well, first of all, I would like to make the comment that the IEA is a great platform for collaboration, and Israel is a member of the Implementing Agreement Advanced Fuel Cells, and that would provide you the opportunity to take part in the annexes, which are the working groups. It's a better word. The official word is annex, but these are working groups. Working on different topics. So we have in the IEA stationary fuel cells as one annex. We have fuel cells for transportation is another one. Then we have also portables. We have an annex on polymer electrolyte fuel cells, and we have an annex on high temperature fuel cells, which comprises SOFC and MCFC, as well as on systems analysis. So this is a big platform, and it's the biggest platform worldwide where you directly can exchange and collaborate with researchers from all over the world. Thematically, it's pretty easy. Everything which is really pre-competitive and basic is a good point for cooperating, and some important things have already been said. I don't need to reiterate anything about catalysis. This is definitely something which is very important and is also in many aspects pre-competitive. What is also pre-competitive is probably all of the degradation mechanisms. The research on degradation mechanisms on fuel cells would lead the way to predict the fuel cell degradation, which is also important because today we understand how we can age an internal combustion engine on a test bed, but we don't know how we can exactly age under realistic conditions a fuel cell and predict that's lifetime. I think very important is also the research on quality of hydrogen and how the fuel cell reacts owing to that. So the impurities we can operate the hydrogen with is, or the fuel cell with, is very important. And all of these points are really pre-competitive cooperation points.
Great. And then maybe, so Lior doesn't have to go last, maybe you can go next.
So collaboration is I think, the way to actually solve big problems. Israel, and I want to also publicize this for the audience. Israel is a member of the IEA, but we are not well represented there. So if there are companies who would like to come up and also join these events, they are more than welcomed. You could contact me, you can contact Anat. I was here just a few minutes ago, and get our people from the Ministry of Energy. Yeah, the Ministry of Energy. We're actually paying in to be a partner in the IEE, and not so large amount, but still there is a membership fee, and we would like to be represented well. I think it will do well to all of us, both internally and outside. Now we are trying to open new paths for collaboration, such as the work that we have done yesterday, and hopefully we'll continue this work. So we will share knowledge through webinars, as Sunita suggested yesterday. We will try to find funding that will support research between countries. There was, for instance, Ballard, the biggest company, fuel cells company in Canada, and probably one of the biggest in the world, contacted me that they saw some work that I did on durability, and they said, okay, we would like to try and work with you. But we need to pave the way for such work to happen, and we're working on this very hard. So it is our belief and intention to form strong collaborations with our peers around the world.
Piotr?
All right, so now here I am coming last. Well, so we've been collaborating over the years with many organizations in the United States and of course outside the United States. And through influx of people first and foremost, we've been able to build a strong program in the area of fuel cells. So when we're talking about platforms for collaboration, we need to mention first and foremost people and how we could bring or exchange people, personnel between different organizations with interest in fuel cells. So we always welcome, we are seeing quite a few young people here today, and we always welcome people to come to Los Alamos and work with us, people especially with good ideas, with interest in different areas of fuel cell research and development, so starting with electrocatalysis through membrane, polymer, chemistry, and durability, as Lior mentioned. I think we are now building some collaborations bottom up, like in the case of the two new consortia we've just mentioned, the Israeli Fuel Cells Consortium and the ElectroCat. And we hope to identify areas pre-competitive, as Detlef mentioned, in which we could work together. And I think in certain areas, such as electrocatalysis, platinum group platinum group metal-free catalyst, this is more about ideas than competition at the moment, so we should be able to do it. To establish collaborations quite effectively. Other areas include, for example, round-robin testing, the development of targets, the test protocols, just to mention a few.
Great. And so we still have a few more minutes. And so what I'd like to do is basically ask each of you, given the this symposium, I think it's been going on for a few years, but this is the first time, as I understand, that there's really a focus on hydrogen and fuel cells. And given the fact that when I asked how many people are familiar with hydrogen fuel cells for 5 or more years, not that many people raised their hands. So I think there were quite a few that are not from the hydrogen and fuel cell industry. And so I think it would be good for each of the panelists, since you're longtime experts in the field, to, if you had to basically provide, a 1-minute takeaway message that you would like to leave the audience with. Again, thinking about the fact that the session is a global fuel cell technology roadmap. How do we promote fuel cells and hydrogen science? Status programs, global engagements. That's kind of the general theme of this specific session. We'll hear more later on hydrogen production and so forth. But kind of the status, the snapshot of your perspective, kind of a 1-minute takeaway. We'll go around one by one to close up the session. But again, I think in terms of the fact that this is a really exciting time, I know in the US we see so many different, we have about 500,000 electric vehicles now in the market. And when you go out on the street, especially in California, you can see a hydrogen vehicle, you can see a hydrogen bus. We have over 4 million passengers riding in hydrogen buses now. You can see, you don't typically see the forklifts, but we have lots of hydrogen forklifts, the backup power units, and then you have electric vehicles, so a number of different plug-in electric vehicles, chargers. We have, obviously hybrid vehicles. Tesla's been doing really well, the Nissan Leaf, the Chevy Bolt. I think for the first time in a long time in history, we're seeing so many different options out there, whether it's advanced biofuels. We're focusing on so many different things at DOE, lightweighting, improving efficiency, advanced combustion, completely zero emission vehicles. And so it's not just the R&D, we're actually seeing the technology out there. So public education and outreach is also important. As Anat said, Congress actually passed the National Hydrogen Fuel Cell Day because the atomic weight of hydrogen, as was mentioned, is 1.008, which of course everyone knows. But again, we use that as an opportunity to get the message out, to engage stakeholders. We have had a Taste of DC event, so throughout Washington, DC, providing the vehicles. As was mentioned, we have a demonstration station, which is not actually a retail station. It's advanced electrolysis, where we're actually taking a higher pressure electrolysis to produce water and reduced loading innovative catalysts. So we actually reduced the cost of electrolyzers 80% since 2002. So again, trying to demonstrate some of those innovations outside the laboratory in the real world. So again, that as opposed to just in the laboratory, and I think it's great that people are, how many people here are from the pure electric vehicle as opposed to hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicle field? If you can raise your hands. Anyone? Okay, so no EV, okay, just a couple of EVs. How many of you are from industry? You can raise your hands. And universities or academia? Okay. I don't know where everyone else is from because not that many people raise their hands. So government? Okay, so a mix. And how many are just generalists interested in the technology? But okay, one person. So it seems like we had a lot of groups that I haven't mentioned. But so it's good that it seems like we have a good, diverse group here that's not necessarily that, that knowledgeable about hydrogen and fuel cell technology. So again, in terms of the takeaway message for this group, considering the good diversity of the audience, why don't we start maybe with Lior this time?
Thank you. So first of all, there are a few shy people here that haven't raised their hands, and I know the faces. So there are more people than you think that are involved in fuel cells. It's going to be a bit longer than just one sentence,
okay.
But so Israel is a small country. And per capita, for good or bad, we always show up on the top of the list. And also in the fuel cell industry, per capita, I think is one of the largest in the world. We have we have at least 4 companies that are involved in fuel cells at different levels, from actual selling fuel cells like Gencell, and Gennady here is hiding the shyest person in the room, to companies who are now moving forward, like Piotr or is now developing fuel cells for the automotive industry and others. So the take-home message that I would give to the industrial or people here and entrepreneurs, if there are any in the audience, is that, as I see it, fuel cells technology is ramping up. This is the time to get in. Please push forward, and with our help, I think we can do great things together. So we will support as much as we can from the R&D side, and hopefully we will all succeed.
So Piotr, the 1-minute takeaway for this diverse audience.
So I think we've been pretty upbeat about the state of fuel cell technology here, but I think there are quite a few challenges remaining, and by no means can we be sure that we will create non-niche technology. So I think it's, in a way, I appeal to most of you or all of you, perhaps if you have good ideas, please try to develop. If you would like to collaborate with us all here, please do not hesitate to do it. Do not be shy, because I think we need all of you.
Great.
Well, if we want to achieve the COP21 targets, which means cutting out 80% of CO2, we need electromobility. We need to have electric traction, at least for passenger vehicles. So fuel cells are clearly on that path, and there's a big future in fuel cells. We will have battery cars as well as probably fuel cell cars. The advantage was already said, except for one. One is that we really can store energy for the long term. That means we can have seasonal storage, which we need with renewable energy together, not so much with nuclear, but with renewable energy we need that. Insofar, fuel cells have a big future if societies can really decide to build up the infrastructure.
Great, thank you. So before we end, I'd like to show one quick video. This is actually a public video, but it's pretty well viewed. So I think, oops. Let's see if I can get that. There we go.
Over the next year, we'll be faced with a decision to support, oppose, or even ignore the future of hydrogen-fueled propulsion. While there's no doubt that the need for an alternative to fossil fuel is real, the debate around hydrogen will intensify. There will be the naysayers, the handbrakes who say that it can't be done, that it's unsafe, that there's no infrastructure to support it. Then there'll be the trailblazers, the first to put up their hand and put down their foot. The bold few, driven to be remembered as those who made a difference, and perhaps the ones who made all the difference. So, as we travel down this hydrogen-paved highway, ready to mark a turning point in history, the question isn't if you'll turn, it's when.
So finally, this is, I think, the big takeaway. This is a really critical time. We've seen lots of progress, but we still have a long way to go. So we have to keep up the momentum, but Israel, and I think globally, we've seen a number of trailblazers, including those here. So please join me in thanking the panel, and thank you to all of you.